I see waiting in the portal. He's in the transfer portal. He's about to join the Matt Mosley Show, although I don't have the portal money that some of these schools have. Oh, there he is, like the Godfather. A little
What's
dark.
with my lighting here, Mosley? It looks bad.
I think those blinds you could, well, but if you undid those blinds, I'm afraid it would
It'd be
dark,
bad.
It would dark.
I don't have
you out.
I just need a cool setup with like a bookshelf and stuff. I don't have that, so I'm sorry.
You're fine. I just, for years I did radio, so it's not anything you had to be concerned about, right?
Right.
And soon I'll send like a ring light and all kinds of things to you, so you'll be ready to go. I was lamenting Dave Baylor's loss to TCU yesterday. College game day goes to Waco. And we're going to talk about, I loved your story on Sawyer Robertson. But Dave, I know you're usually writing about college football and doing a great job on that. But you also are well aware of the long reign that Baylor had in women's basketball over pretty much everybody.
Yes.
Right? And so for 37 years, the Horned Frogs were not allowed to come out of the wilderness. And for 35 straight times, Baylor beat them. And Dave, unfortunately, the Frogs have now won the last 5. And so I don't know. It was unfair to anybody who was hired to replace Kim Mulkey to think that Baylor could just sort of go on dominating everybody. But it's why you hate replacing legends. There's almost it's almost always a losing proposition. It's the same thing in college basketball right now, like especially for the guy's son, for somebody to follow Bruce Pearl at Auburn. It's probably not going to go smoothly. I would say that the only time it's gone smoothly in recent years is John Shire at Duke for Coach K. But
listen, Mosley, that's my first beat ever in journalism was covering the Kilgore College women's basketball team. And Coach Evelyn Blaylock was kind of a mentor of Coach Mulkey's, and she won 3 national championships at Kilgore College, and they couldn't replace her either. So I actually talked to Coach Mulkey about her one time, and she said she drove to Kilgore by herself to go to Coach Blaylock's funeral to pay her respects, because Coach Blaylock was one of the first people that sort of helped her out and would send players over there to Ruston to help her out at Louisiana Tech for Coach Barmore. And so, I understand that's tough,
Yeah. But for it to be the Frogs conference, that's really what's difficult. And Dave, you being an Aggie, you don't always lead with that, but I'll certainly remind folks of that. From a bubble standpoint, by the way, the Aggies women's coach, I had her fired. I thought she was headed toward, and suddenly she somehow turned that program. She's got them winning. So maybe, who knows, maybe she's turned that around. They paid a lot of money for her, and it was not going well, but now it is. Dave, have you spent any time with Bucky Ball? Bucky McMillan, the Texas A&M basketball coach, or
have not, but I know the enthusiasm is for, I think there was a sort of a bare minimum expectation, given that there was like one player on the team when he got there, and they were throwing together a team. And, Buzz was beloved as a Billy Clyde assistant, a Texas guy, and he came there, and then it just kind of, people started getting a little worn out on the speeches and the book recommendations. And, I think Buzz is interesting character, interesting dude. But I think after a while they were like, why don't we just win some basketball games? And so when he left and all the players were gone, I think there was sort of a, hey, what could go, it's a young guy, plays exciting brand of ball. Let's see what happens. So I think it's been a really just fun. I think the Aggies have just enjoyed the season. It's been fun to have a guy that has brought some excitement to it. I don't know if you know this, but Texas A&M basketball has not traditionally been a source of much enthusiasm down in College Station.
Well, the guy who sadly is having to step away from Tarleton State did infuse A&M basketball with some passion, and that's Billy Clyde Gillespie. That's right. One of the. I think that's one of the old. Be careful. The grass is not always greener.
Oh yeah.
He had one of the greatest jobs. That Aggies loved him. he could have, as long as he just kept kind of doing his thing, could have done it for 10 or 15 more years.
They would have named that building after him for sure.
And Kentucky came calling, and the only person that can turn down Kentucky is a guy named Scott Drew. All right. Man, Dave, this Sawyer Robertson story, really nice job on that. It's funny how these stories work. You start on these things, and then you probably have in your mind, okay, maybe it'll run now, maybe it'll run this. Well, this one, I mean, my gosh, you and Sawyer have had time to, I mean, it's almost like you're like his big brother, I think. There's been fishing expeditions. There's been all kinds of things. This one now, this story comes out connected to the draft because he was just at the NFL Combine. I was trying to start his Heisman campaign a little bit too quick this year. I think you kind of were picking up on the same vibe. Yeah. And obviously, Baylor didn't have the season we thought they might have. He still put up great numbers and all, but sometimes, Dave, there are these people that come along and players, and you're almost like, this guy seems too good to be true. I would say you've now spent enough time over however many months and sort of watched Sawyer's career where you now kind of are, you probably had those thoughts. It's like, is this kid as genuine and earnest as he really seems? And I think, Dave, the answer you've come up with is that the answer is yes.
Yeah, I mean, I think we don't know any of these people, even the coaches, the players, really very well. I mean, we get such short windows with them. And that's always the concern, right? Is like, I'm going to write a story about what a great person this guy is based off a 20-minute interview. And I sort of tend to avoid that because I don't know. I think there's been times in the past, we've been bitten by that. And so this started, like you said, was, it was the week of the Sanford game. So he'd had the SMU game. Everything looked like it was firing on all cylinders. And I thought, man, this guy could be a dark horse Heisman contender. And I went up there to sort of, the Baylor SIDs were great about saying, hey, if you want to come up. But then Sawyer kind of took it out of their hands a little bit, like where he's like, hey, let's go fishing out back, and they were like, dude, can you just let us know what you're doing? Because this guy's just going to, Sawyer's very not guarded. And so it was just, I kind of got to see him really in his element. He's just walking around the building, working the rooms. He's like, do you want to go to Bible study with me? And I'm like, I don't know, man. It's a kind of private. And he's like, dude, I don't care. Just come on if you want. If you don't, you want. And that's what's interesting about him is like, I think Sawyer can meet everybody on their terms. I think he can say, hey, this is open to if you want it. If you don't want it, I'm not going to judge you. I'm not going to preach to you. I'm not going to try to get you to. But if you want to come. And so for me, as a guy writing a story, I'm like, well, yeah, I kind of want to see what this is about. And you just end up kind of really thinking, hey, this dude's really fascinating, a really earnest, really wholesome character. And same thing you talked about. I wrote a story. I actually wrote a draft of this story. And then the season kind of went the way it did. And there was not a real good window to run it. And so I basically went back to editors and said, hey, I think there's an intriguing story here for a guy that could be a kind of a wild card pick in the draft, in a draft that's not very loaded at quarterback. And I was lucky enough that they wanted it. And so I was able to kind of pick it back up and go up and see him in Frisco while he was training and talk to him about that.
I love the Mike Leach angle on this. And it was like, Mike Leach's last quarterback, and what you unearthed with the help of Sawyer is even some things that Mike had said to him that Sawyer thought had been lost to history. He thought maybe somehow he'd lost some of those text messages on his phone, and we've all lost things on our phone, me more than most. Me, one time in a fishing hole in East Texas at Elkhart Lake, out there outside of Palestine at Elkhart, and I was diving down in there. You should never dive in that lake, but the thing hadn't been dredged in about 40 years, and trying to find one of those. But we all have, Dave, we've all had those, like our kids' pictures or something, and we've lost something. And he found something that Mike had said to him that maybe he put like in his videos or something, and he thought he had lost. And it was kind of neat. It was very poignant to think of Mike Leach, as weird as he was and as not non-touchy-feely as he was, to see that he like genuinely cared about this kid and was trying to kind of unlock him. I mean, Sawyer was not one of these quick studies who's like rolls out and as a freshman, he's just unbelievable. Oh, look at this kid. This is the next great quarterback at Mississippi State. This was a journey that took 3 or 4 years before he was ever unleashed on America. But that for you to have chronicled Mike Leach and had met him over the years, I know to that angle had to be like really, really interesting to you.
Yeah, I'm fascinated by that whole collection of guys. I mean, they're guys that sort of realize football is not life and death. They don't sleep in their office. They go hang out at night. They drink a lot. They go to I would talk to Mike while he was walking in Key West, in the summer, and where he spent a long time in Key West. And you never knew if what he was saying was the truth, like, oh, there's an iguana that just fell out of a tree over here. Let me go see what he's doing, see if I can help him out. And so this would be happening live on the phone, and he's rustling around in some branches. And so that's one of the things I took from this was like, when you were Mike's, you were Mike's, he like, Sawyer wanted so badly to play for Texas Tech and they weren't interested. And then he got this great consolation prize. And that is, his idol, recruited him instead, first to Washington State and then to Mississippi State. And then he wanted so badly to show him that he was the guy he thought he was, that he got in his head. Will Rogers told me that it was very obvious, you could see Sawyer and he would just go check on him and say, hey man, are you okay? Like, it's not that, And so Sawyer genuinely, like I told him, I said, I feel like there's a little bit of sadness here that you're going to constantly wish for Leach's approval and you're never going to get it. He said, I think you're right about that. And so when you talk to Mummy, who would talk to Leach all the time for 2 hours at night about quarterbacks or about aliens or whatever, you talk to Mason Miller, you talk to all these guys, they were all like, what's he talking about? Like, Leach loved the kid. He loved him and he wanted so badly, he wouldn't let anybody move him down the depth chart. And he was not playing well, but he said, no, it's going to be fine, because that's what's the magic to me about all those air raid guys. It's literally about, when Kyler and Baker were at Oklahoma, I wrote a story about Lincoln Riley and why is he such a quarterback whisperer? And I had so many of these air raid play callers say, like, we're all good with, like, it's just how it works. You make the quarterback believe he can call anything he wants on any play and make the throw, and then they do it. And that's the baseline of what that system is. It's about belief. It's about trusting the guy has the right call at the line. It's about what he sees rather than what you see. And so Sawyer just couldn't get over having that much trust from Mike Leach, and it really ate him up. And he just says, he'll never see it. He'll never see that I finally figured it out. And that really bothers him. And so to be there in the moment when he actually figures out he has these text messages and he sees that Mike Leach said, you're ahead of BJ Simmons at this point, who set the NCAA passing record in 2003, since broken, but still, by Bailey Zappi. But he said,
of course.
Yeah, of course. So he's like, you're ahead of him at this point. You're going to be great, essentially. Like, never forget the sky's the limit for you. And to see Sawyer find this and realize that he had actually seen it. He actually did believe that he could do it. It was a weird, I get goosebumps thinking about it. It's just like when you're writing a story, you don't expect to be there for the moment. And I was, So I saw it. It was really cool. And
the tie-in that Aranda had.
Yeah.
Coaching for Leach at Tech in 2000. And the funny thought that of him, first of all, can you imagine those conversations? We now know Dave, but we also know Dave probably didn't say a lot, right? Dave is probably Mike talking most of the time, and then them showing up late at places as Dave drove him around for recruiting. First of all, I can't see Leach being that into recruiting. I'm not saying he wasn't good at it in his own weird way, but he does not strike me as someone who was just desperately trying to make a bunch of calls. And try to hit like every high school. That does not seem like Mike. But but as his legend grew, he probably didn't need to do as much of that. But that again, doesn't it seem like fate that Sawyer ended up with an air raid? I mean, think about all the things that had to happen for Sawyer to and again, he saved Aranda. Now Aranda almost couldn't save himself this season. His AD getting into some issues probably saved Aranda, right? But it's just wild how all this stuff kind of comes together. But I think Dave, in some ways, was the perfect fit for Sawyer.
But like, imagine that, right? Your dream, you grew up idolizing Mike Leach. Your dream is to play for Mike Leach. You get to play for Mike Leach, and then you're there and he dies. And he dies in December. And the portal's opening. You're demoted to third string for the first time. They're changing the offense. Arnett fired most of Leach's guys right after the funeral. So there's a bad feeling in general. And Sawyer says he would absolutely not have left if Leach had been there because he wanted to prove it so badly. So now he's got to go in the portal, and he's a kid who's a little bit more of a curious kind of wanderer seeker anyway. And you're getting all these calls from people that are promising you all this stuff and money and starting jobs and everything. And he was not interested in most of that. Like I think his family really, his dad, Stan, was a first round draft pick of the Montreal Expos in 1990, and tendonitis kind of wrecked his career. And he just came back to West Texas and played safety for Spike at Texas Tech and just kind of stayed. They never pushed Sawyer into sports. So the idea that he came home, he was at private school, went to public school, came home the first day of public school and said, oh, by the way, I tried out from quarterback. And his dad about fell out of his chair because he had never even seen him throw a football before. And so, he's a different type of dude. He's a much, I thought Sonny Dykes' quote in the story, which he said to reporters the week of the Baylor game, was that, we recruited him, but we didn't even mind missing out on him because Sawyer was Mike Leach's kind of kid. And I thought that did a lot of heavy lifting really for me because that's who Sawyer is. He's that dude. And so imagine you're grieving, you lost your hero, your idol, your coach, and now you got to go searching. And I imagine that Dave Aranda would be a comforting person to talk to who had that same background. Aranda's told me before that, like you said, you don't think that he talked a lot, but like the story was that they would go to these dinners and Dion, Dave's wife, would get into these arguments with Leach about politics, and they would be arguing back and forth the whole time. And Dave would say, like, Dion, you're going to get me fired. What are you doing? And so Leach I actually heard that Leach called Aranda just a couple of weeks before he died and said, hey, I really miss those days with you and Dion and those dinners and how much fun those were. And so they did have that bond, and they didn't know it from the get-go, but when they went and sat down and talked, and I'm sure there was a comfort level for Sawyer, and he just wanted to. By then he thought, and I'm sure he would not find any of these things line up to be fate. In Sawyer's mind, this is providence. I mean, this is what he believes, and I'm not saying I don't. I'm just saying this Sawyer's lives very much by his faith. Going to Baylor was very much a choice. He wanted to go to a Christian university. And so I think the way it lined up to him would be that it worked out the way it was supposed to.
Now I'm thinking about Dion Aranda. She may lean a little left, is what I'm thinking.
I'm not trying to stir it up over here. Just saying, I'm sure it's in general about anybody. Anybody arguing with Mike. He used to call me and say, you're the guy from Kilgore, right? And I'd say, yes, sir. And he'd say, well, that's where Stone Cold's from. And I said, no, he's not. He's from Edna. He said, no, he's not. He's from Kilgore. He would just argue with me. And I said, dude, my dad was the mayor of Kilgore. We would have put a sign up on the city limits if Stone Cold was from Kilgore. And he would just tell me, oh, Kilgore's a terrible place. I never minded recruiting Kilgore and Lubbock because Kilgore kids never got homesick. And so I could understand anybody arguing with Leach about anything because that was his goal, was to get you to argue with him.
Yeah. He was going to hire I was told he was going to try to hire Bryles right before he died. Like he was on the verge. And as we were talking about Dion, joking about all that, I thought to myself, Mike was the one guy that could have put up with all the backlash that would have come. Now, we don't know if Mississippi State's president and the AD would have put up with everything that comes along with that, but Art was convinced Mike, and it would probably been as an analyst or something, but it just kind of shows you that even knowing how much of a pariah Art is in college football, in Mike's mind, that was his friend. And that's a big part of his life. And he wanted to he wanted to give Art another opportunity. And again, who knows what would happen. By the way, Art Briles back in college football out there, and that may be your next stop. You may need to get out there to Portales, New Mexico.
It's interesting because I don't think, he worked for Leach as long as he did. And I don't think there was a lot of, I don't think Art feels like he learned a lot about coaching from his time there. And he felt like he already had it under control. So I think it would have been a marriage of convenience to come back together for the two of them. But I could see Leach doing that. Yeah, he genuinely, obviously, if you ever saw a single one of his press conferences, he was not too worried about what anyone else thought about him.
All right. Well, this is really good. I appreciate you, Dave, taking the time. Can you reveal like your next big story? What can you tease us a little bit? What are you cooking up for us? Is there any SWC related? Anytime you do something involving the SWC, that's when I like it the most, because you and I have very similar backgrounds. Although you come from a much bigger town, I come from Kaufman. Kilgore is like 10 times as big as my hometown, but we do have similar backgrounds. My dad was city attorney. Your dad was the mayor. My dad was a lawyer. We've got very similar things. What do you have coming up that we can look forward to?
I don't know. I know I'm working on a Texas women's hoops story for the regional here in Austin. I probably should do a Mark Campbell story about that legendary Frogs coach putting him over the top.
I'm tired of hearing about him. I did have him on recently. And
I know. I'm just messing with you. I don't know. I don't know. I've got a few things. I'm trying to work on a couple of projects, but I don't know. It depends on, getting past this one. I've had some other stuff cooking, but nothing imminent right now that I can tell you that I think would be right up our wheelhouse here.
I had to laugh. Our star player at Baylor, hearing her talk about Ramadan, the largest Baptist school in the country. And she was like, well, we're in the middle of Ramadan. And unfortunately, she went out, Dave, and went like 6 for 23 or something from the field. But I thought, again, I think that's awesome to have different faiths and all. But
totally. That's one of the most fascnaling things about covering the sport and the different cultures, right? And I've always thought, man, how tough would it be in Ramadan to have to play sports, given all the restrictions. So that is interesting.
Buddy, even as a Christian,
I
find it difficult when I tried the Christian thing of fasting. I'm like, well, I can't do this. This doesn't seem to work for me. And then I tried to do it just for my health, to drop a few pounds. And I'm good at it. Actually, I'm good at like waiting. But when I come off of it, I'm just like a wild banshee. Like I don't come out of fasting very well. I make up for all the calories. So you've always had the help of all that height. I mean, you stand at about 6'5" or something. So, you can pack on as much as you need.
I can hide it with big shirts at least.
Did that Aggie story I tried to get involved in and help you with? I was trying to remember if I got to see that one come out.
Which one?
When I was hanging out with the Torn family.
Oh, yeah.
That game.
Okay.
That was that's about the Aggies, whatever they call it. The Aggie syndrome.
Could they learn to believe before they threw an interception on the 5-yard line so it held up, I would say, unfortunately.
You didn't really need my help, but I just remember saying, "Hey, do you want to talk to?"
I knew Mr. Torn. I'd met Mr. Torn before, but some of the other buddies, that was very helpful.
Right.
But you say I'm an Aggie. I spent 3 semesters there. You still get I still went to the fish camp, and I understand it. But I just like to, I don't want anybody to get the wrong idea. I like to write about all of them. Okay, Mosley, just make it clear.
I'm sorry. I've outed Dave Wilson.
I like to be employed.
You love the SWC when people.
I do.
When I see your name, I can't help but think of former Texas A&M coach Dave Wilson and who did it? Tom Wilson. Tom Wilson. I'm so sorry. I had a brief bad moment there, but Tom Wilson, who ended up coaching at Corsicana. Yeah. Who I bet you crossed paths with him at some point.
I didn't, but I know he gave Kettrick Sanford the ball a whole lot.
Wait, now I know Kettrick Sanford, who ended up at University of Houston. Yeah. Who's married to a woman we know in Dallas, who's like big in the Junior League of Dallas. Kettrick Sanford, yes. And she was the president of the Junior League of Dallas. He is married to the first African-American president of the Junior League of Dallas. Kettrick Sanford is. So you and I could do this all day, right?
We could do it all day.
But he was great. But the pre-Kettrick Sanford at University of Houston was a guy back in the SWC days named Chuck Witherspoon. Ooh. And they would hand it to Spoon, and he was scary good. He was probably 5'7", 5'8", was a sledgehammer, and could not be stopped. And he would have been coached by probably John Jenkins. It was probably post-party.
I had a few text message exchanges with Spoon for a story I wrote a few years ago, but we never quite got on the phone together. But man, he was awesome.
Yeah.
Remember how awesome their jersey names were, though? Manny Hazard the third, John Brown the third, Manny Hazard, JB3. It said. So you remember Chuck Witherspoon just said C Spoon. They were the coolest.
One of those guys from Switzer's Oklahoma team that was firing guns up there in the dorms ended up on one of those U of H teams. His last name may have been like Peters or something. Don't get me lying, but Manny or Hazard, whoever you were just talking about, I think he had 106 catches one year. And I never knew, like, of those quarterbacks, if I have to have a hard time telling you, I know one of them won the Heisman. Andre Ware, but I could have made the argument that Klingler was better. Like a college, I mean, like they're both awesome.
Klingler told me once that they would call a play and Manny would just supposed to run a route. He'd say, "I don't like that route," and he would run a different route, catch a touchdown. They'd come to the sideline and Jenkins would say, "What just happened?" And he'd say, "Well, I didn't like that route, so I ran a corner instead." So Jenkins said, "All right, just do that from now on." And that's kind of how that whole offense worked, which I always found fascinating because they were so awesome.
The best one though was Jenkins, and one of the things he got in trouble for.
Oh yeah,
was showing that film session.
Want to keep their attention, Mosley. Want to keep their attention.
These young men, some of their concentration. You needed to keep them involved, and he would splice in some porn. I don't know if it was softcore. I don't know, but he would in those film sessions. Apparently he would splice in some porn.
Oh yeah.
Oh my gosh. There's one great Baylor player, unbelievable Baylor player, and like he wanted to go play for Bill Yeoman at U of H. It's Alfred Anderson, and he was desperately wanted to, but I think they misread Alfred. Alfred came from a Baptist home, did not drink, was at one point was considered the like number one recruit in the country. And they took him out and tried to take him out drinking. Yeah. And that's how Baylor ended up getting Alfred Anderson in the early 80s.
Real quick, I'll end that with a really good one. Earl Campbell told me he visited Houston. Bum Phillips was his recruiter. And they sat around and compared offers around the campfire one night. Everybody talked about how much they were getting. And Earl said, "I ain't coming here. Y'all are the biggest cheaters I've ever seen." And so he had to call Bum and tell him I ain't coming because y'all are cheaters.
he goes to that bastion of just above board behavior at Austin.
Okay, we know. He says that he swears that DKR was the only one that didn't personally try to offer him money.
Of all the people around that program.
He says DKR didn't do it.
Oh my gosh. Well, the guy, by the way, trying to recruit Marcus Dupree, on that video at 30 for 30 was Tommy Rayo, the old running backs coach for Acres at Texas. And Tommy Rayo was my dad's best friend at Baylor. They played football for Baylor together in the late 60s. So All right, Dave, this is great. Story time. This could be a weekly deal. Now, unfortunately, I don't know if I have the money to pay you what you would normally require. So I'll have to look at that.
I normally get 0 from this, so it works out good.
I tell you what, the VTEX, your place, your choice. Schmaltz is a sponsor of mine, the greatest sandwich shop in Central Texas. On me next time we are in Waco together. Dave, I appreciate it. Great job on the Sawyer
stories, man. Thank you so much.
It's good. There he goes. Dave Wilson from ESPN.com. And we go way back.